glad to see we've got a bigger room. Let's go and have everybody on the panel introduce themselves, starting way down at the far end.
My name is Brian Buse. Do you want us to say anything about yourselves?
Like yourself out.
Well, I saw when I was 15 years old, my friends and I had some art friends. We used to just come up with video games in the basement, and we heard that there was a movie by this random guy named Hayao Miyazaki in Salt Lake City. We'd never heard of him before, never seen the film. This is before he was famous here, and it was just a great excuse to get out of our houses and get free from our parents. So we took a bus down to Salt Lake City to the one theater where they were showing Princess Mononoke. And that was just, it was just supposed to be just a fun experience to hang out with friends, but it totally changed my life. It was one of the films, like one of the few things that I watched, and I thought, it doesn't really matter to me how difficult it is to get a career in visual storytelling when you do it. And next year, my first book that I both written and illustrated hits the shelf. So, pretty cool. I love that to
Hi everyone, I'm Lian Fangshen. I teach animation at the University of Utah. I teach both animation studies and animation production. And I was a comic book artist in Taiwan, so I'm from Taiwan. And grew up with Japanese anime. And a lot of my research are about Japanese anime. I do a lot of research in children and obsessive family techniques.
My name is Sandra Taylor. I'm a writer, and I'm not generally an anime fan. And my first introduction to anime films at all was Hayao Miyazaki's Princess Mononoke. And I had a different experience because I was very, very confused for a very long time. But I have come to love these films. I love watching them with my kids. We own, all of them, and they've really touched my life. And so I'll be coming from that perspective, where I'm not necessarily an anime fan in general, but these films speak to a much broader audience and obviously.
I'm Natalie Whipple. I'm an author and a longtime anime fan, so we're the opposite. Miyazaki, too, was my first, probably, exposure to anime, but a lot earlier than Mononoke. My mom, one summer, desperate to find videos to distract her children and have them stop annoying her, happened to find Kiki and Totoro in like a bargain bin. This was long before Disney picked up Miyazaki movies and started promoting them, and I absolutely fell in love with them. I had no idea what anime was at the time, but I knew I loved those films, and I looked for anything that looked like that ever since then. So I'm really excited for this
I'm Dan Willis. I'm also an author. I worked for Wizards of the Coast, the Dragonlance brand, for a long time. I have my own book out now called Flux Engine, which is a steampunk western, and I signed a contract about half an hour ago so that a series I'm doing with Tracy Hickman, also of Dragonlance fame, called Dragons of the Confederacy, a steampunk Civil War story, a series actually, will be out in March. So,
Congratulations.
Well, thanks. I came to Miyazaki because I was a kid in the, I guess it was early 80s, I think, when I first encountered, I was in high school, I think, encountered Robotech, which was the Americanization of all things mech in Japan. And when I got to college out here in the West, the guy who lived upstairs from me was this huge anime fan. I'm like, what the heck is that? And I said, I seem to remember, I looked at some of it, oh, that's the giant robot thing, let's see some of that. And one night I went up there, and he had this film called Kiki's Delivery Service. It was in Japanese, it was not in English. And you hear all these 20-something-year-old guys are sitting around watching a 13-year-old girl go through, when she was in a movie. Utterly captivated, and having a guy who was Japanese telling us what was going on, because of course we couldn't understand any of it. It's in English, but we couldn't understand what was going on. And thinking, wow, what a great storyteller. That he was able to captivate guys that are here to watch, giant robots shoot each other, with the story of a 13-year-old girl. And that was my introduction to Miyazaki, and I have been amazed and delighted by him ever since. We have a new latecomer down there. You want to introduce yourself? Introduce yourself.
Absolutely. I got held up by zombies. True story. My name is John Fellow. I'm a longtime anime fan. I've been a fan since 1991, I think. And my introduction to Miyazaki was actually My Neighbor Totoro, which I've actually watched both versions of it, because originally I had it on VHS. I'm dating myself. And I've watched, and you got hooked on his stuff because it's not your standard, giant mechas or magical girls or like slice of life comedy high school stuff. It's people going through real life conflicts and everything, in both internally and externally. And I think if I have a favorite, it's going to be Princess Mononoke because it's very deep. So.
Okay, well, I'd like to welcome everybody out. Before we get started real quick, I'm going to be giving out a prize at the end of the event, worth literally hundreds of pennies. For anybody who texts, keep that number over there. So, got a smartphone, you want a prize, worth literally hundreds of pennies, please text. And then we'll move on. This is going to be a very interesting panel. I didn't know I was going to be the moderator until yesterday when I got an email saying, please moderate this panel. So, this comes off a little slapdash. So be it. Of course, we all know that Miyazaki retired. I have been talking to some people, and I guess it's not generally known yet that his son is closing the studio. I thought he had confirmed that.
I'd heard it, and then I heard that maybe not, and then
Maybe
I
not.
heard that maybe
taking
so.
a break or something.
Yeah. So that's exactly how clear it is.
Yes.
Right now.
So yeah, this could be a very somber event, but we're not going to let that happen.
The good news is, though, that he has worked on his own personal mangas. He's just retired from the studio scene. So
Yeah.
he's got one out he's working on right now that's like a samurai. Something, I think it's like
very
16th century Japanese story. So
I was going to say, from what I know of creators, for all that they retire, until they are dead, they do not stop making things.
Yeah.
And so,
unless they go insane.
anytime you see a creator retire, just wait patiently.
I think Miyazaki is still making his manga.
Is it?
Yes, he's still working on a lot of ideas. He's just saying, he said in one interview he's just too old to do animation, so he will still continue to produce his work, but in another form.
And that makes perfect sense. It's exhausting.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how we got into Miyazaki.
Start down here with John. Tell us.
Yeah.
Can I just tell you something?
Yeah, we kind of did.
Well, basically, since my introduction had already televised, the only reason I actually got into it, one of my friends, her family, had movies, and I go, what's this? And they go, oh, it's a Miyazaki film. It's My Neighbor Totoro. And I was like, oh, check it out. And so we sat down and watched it with her kids, and they're like, singing along. And I'm like, and so I watched it and it was kind of fun because you see not only these fun characters, including this gigantic bear, he's Totoro. He's huge. And I'm just like, these guys are pretty great. You kind of see the human characters and you kind of get a feel for who they are and kind of what they're going through. And it's a little deeper than what I usually watch. And so I was fascinated by it because I'm seeing something from a more human, non-comedic perspective than I'm used to. And it kind of drew me in. And then I saw Princess Mononoke, and I saw drawing a complete blank, unfortunately, but there's a lot.
What's the subject? It's okay, you're in front of an audience of a bunch of people, so it's kind of
Yeah, well, they're drawing a blank at the moment, but I've seen a lot of them, so.
Well, and this is one of the things that I really love about Miyazaki, is that he takes, some of his stories are grand and sweeping. Princess Mononoke is huge, there's save the world stories. But I have a personal love for his small-scale stories. My Neighbor Totoro, the drama is so small, it's child-sized, and yet it is completely relatable. Spirited Away, everything that happens to her is about her being Chihiro is put in an uncomfortable situation, and she has to go down this scary flight of stairs. And you're sitting there going, oh my gosh, and you really relate to it because it's a human-sized problem, and yet you realize that in our lives, you know, these small obstacles really are huge for us. And we don't have to save the world, but we have to figure out how to get down the flight of stairs and ask the guy for a job because, you know, otherwise we're going to get turned into a pig.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because that's one of the Porco Rosso is one of those interesting stories where you realize that what Miyazaki really is telling are character stories. And so much of what we in the West experience as entertainment is not character-driven. It should be, but it isn't. Anybody not seen Guardians of the Galaxy? Oh, there's a few. Shame on you. Wonderful character-driven story where they sell you a raccoon and a talking tree. Porco Rosso, same thing. Wonderful character-driven story where you really only wonder once why the guy's a pig, and then you just go with it. And that's the kind of stuff that Miyazaki is famous for, and is so wonderful about his work. Is these, you know, these deep connections that people form because they're interested in the characters. What about you guys? What are your
thoughts on? Oh, go ahead.
I think it's interesting how so many of us have been exposed to anime through Miyazaki. It seems like he is kind of almost a gateway drug, and like kind of either throws people into the world of anime, or at least most people kind of know who he is, or it's really I don't know what's the word for it. Brought anime into kind of a more mainstream line, whereas before, because I did grow up watching anime back in the time where like it was super nerdy, and there wouldn't be like a giant room of people here just to see, you know, a panel about Miyazaki because not that many people knew about it. I mean, I was like literally the only one in my high school in Utah who was like into it. I think since, you know, the Miyazaki has come out from Disney and stuff, and he's really promoted it.
Well, I was going to say, even the
it's
fact that Disney picked it up, you know, because it was becoming this thing, and it was so strong that it didn't have massive distribution, and yet it was so compelling that Disney, as a company, really knows what's worth, you know, what is pushable and what is not. Looked at it and said, yeah, we want that.
Well, remember, Disney actually picked it up several years and sat on it because the theory being that they were actually threatened by Miyazaki stuff. Then they got Pixar and John Lasseter, who's Miyazaki's biggest cheerleader, and a brilliant storyteller in his own right. And Lasseter went, oh, we can't sit on these, and began putting them out. So, thank God for that.
I want to say something that I'm actually not a Miyazaki fan at all.
No, can I justify that right here? I feel like, so I watched the Land of Lost Races. I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's about what you just said. I watched The Wind Rises just a little while ago, and so first of all, I want to say that I don't see Hayao Miyazaki as a perfect person or a perfect storyteller, but I would say that he's probably the best one alive right now out of everybody who's out there. I would put him in my top spot. And one of the things that I've loved about Wind Rises, or like one of the things like Wind Rises was just awesome. I never felt like the main character, if you guys haven't seen it, like there was only the positive side of him. And I really felt like Miyazaki was telling basically his own hero story. And it was like the only thing, like honestly, as I was thinking about preparation for this panel, like trying to think like, let's not, you know, just say him as a perfect person, let's see him as a human being. And that was like the only thing I could really think of was the fact that like he didn't tell the downside of his character. Maybe that's like argument, you know,
I would say the reason I'm not a big fan of Miyazaki is because I'm a big fan of Japanese anime, and if you know a lot of Japanese anime, you will see Miyazaki is a more opposite side of a lot of things.
It's definitely not the same side.
Miyazaki is quite, his story is quite universal. On the other hand, that is why Disney actually accepted his film in the United States. On the other hand, if you see a lot of other stuff, it's a lot more dark stuff, like darker stuff, sex violence, a lot more compared to Miyazaki. So Miyazaki himself actually said also in one interview he disliked, I don't know if that's a good translation, and actually he hates anime fans, he hates otaku. and in his film, he tried to criticize, obsessive anime fans, and he thinks those people just watch anime without realize the real world, things like that. So he, as a figure in Japan, is very different from how we understand this, Japanese animation community, things like that. So I put Miyazaki, from my perspective, doing research on Japanese anime fans, he's actually the opposite figure compared to a lot of people agree with giant robots. He doesn't have giant robots himself, although he always have cute young girls as the heroine in his film, which is quite common in many Japanese anime. But on the other hand, he doesn't have those elements that consider to be very common. So I put him on the other side, and I think that actually made him and his work universal in a certain way. He also got influenced by Western film, not only American film, but also a lot of European film in his career and in his production, as well as that at earlier of his life, he wanted to be a filmmaker rather than an animation producer, director. So it's kind of different kind of development of the director of filmmaker.
That's fascinating. That explains a lot for me because a lot of, I'm going to call it the deeper anime is very, very opaque to me and kind of confusing. And that doesn't mean I can see that it's valuable. I can see that there's really awesome stuff in it and that I don't have a lot of the cultural context needed to really appreciate that. And I actually felt some of that when I watched Spirited Away for the first time because, in America, the story arc goes like this. You build to a climax, and suddenly we resolve it, and the movie's over. And Spirited Away does kind of this. And then we're at the end of storytelling. Yeah. And so the whole time I watched it, I'm like, my brain was trying. Where are we building? No, that's not it. Okay, where? No. And I actually couldn't enjoy it the first time I watched it because my brain was so trying to understand the structure of the story. And then the second time through, I loved it because my brain stopped trying to fit it into the structure.
It's really interesting because, the structure of a lot of Asian storytelling, they plant seeds, and I think the viewer or the reader is expected to trust the creator that it's all going to come together at the end. And you see that a lot in Miyazaki's work, that you're like, I'm not really sure what this is all going, and then at the end, it all kind of comes together in that one moment where the rest of the movie makes sense. It's kind of a backwards
and see, now
way
I trust
to write. And yeah, it's a backwards way to write a plot for American storytellers. We write our plots much different.
Sorry.
I've got a question at some point. Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, one now.
No.
Okay. Well, the one thing I've noticed, and this is not a slam on any particular thing, but it's a lot of storytelling I found is people like to fit into the 4-point rule, where it's like build, climax, build. There's like starting, middle, climax, and then resolution. Whereas, as you said, the Japanese storytelling is more fluid. I guess is that the right word I'm using?
Miyazaki's film.
Miyazaki's storytelling. I've seen it in a lot of things as well. Like there's little bits and pieces, but we have more than one epic battle.
Sure.
So it's a little bit more. But yeah, Miyazaki especially does this because you're seeing especially if there's more than one main character, you kind of have to give each likes to give them all screen time. I think so. Yeah.
Dan, at some point, is it okay if I ask a question?
Shoot.
Not going to throw us off. I would love to hear just one moment from everybody of the film, and why it was that was powerful to you, how that affected you. We can start with Dan.
Start down the end and we'll work down this way.
And I think for me, it's spoiler warning, I think. It's in Mononoke when Mononoke's fighting the leader of the raiding party, or she's kind of the higher up. But she's the leader for.
Oh, Lady Bushi.
Yeah, that's right. And she's fighting them, and you see like the full, you can see like her full rage. she's angry for the forest, and you kind of see that clash where humans versus nature it's a very abstract concept. And if you were just to talk about it, you see her as like an embodiment against development, and it's a really kind of powerful scene because it kind of be going, this is what she is. She speaks for the wolves, but not just wolves, for the full forest being encroached upon, and for her, and she's fighting kind of the embodiment of the attackers that she sees them, and it's kind of a really powerful scene because very few words are spoken, but the actions are just so profound. As every sword clash, every strike, as they're moving to roofs, it's really powerful.
And the way those wolves get into the city, they get into the city, and they're running down the hill.
And you can just feel like this is going to hurt somebody, and it's going to whoosh.
Yeah, it's powerful.
You see like the power that is in them as both creatures of the forest. So
yeah. For me, a part that really affected me, a very simple part in Porco Rosso, the part that came to mind first was the part with where Gina, the love interest, the very romantic person, the one who, when pirates come to her restaurant, all of them have agreed that they will not fight within 50 miles just because she's so beautiful. How could you tarnish this wonderful woman's restaurant? And she's up in the garden, and the very cocky American comes and he's trying to woo her and wants to tell her that if she marries him, that he'll make her first lady, he's going to become president. And she tells him, oh, you're stupid, I like that. And then she said, no, I'm betting on that someone's going to come and visit me in my garden. And that same moment, in comes the red plane. That very, just plane that really, I think for a lot of people who've seen that film, that plane just kind of takes a spot in your heart. That whatever it is about it, that in fact, random little bit of info, some people on Vimeo, I saw this in very random film, somebody actually built a model airplane of that red plane and got it to work. And it was funny because just the way they describe it in the film, that it sticks to the water like glue, but once you get in the air, it soars like a dream. That it actually performs like that. I don't know how Miyazaki knew that it would actually perform like that, but if you watch the film, it's impossible looking off the water. But once you do, the weight makes it just the way that the engine is removed up above, it flips around so quickly. So. But that moment when the red plane comes in and starts doing the flips and just saying hello, basically, there's a part of that, it has so little to do with advancing the plot, but you feel connected with the characters. You just love them. You love the relationship and the history that they put together. And so that's the part that I want to share.
I also like Princess Mononoke the most. The reason that I like it is because this whole idea, and also in its art design, how Miyazaki tried to blur this gender line. So Mononoke and the characters, Ashitaka. So the most interesting thing for me, I watched it several times, actually millions of times because I have to study it. I watched once with my friend in the United States and who had never seen anime before. And he watched it with me and he said, which one is the girl and which one is the boy, and both of them are girls? I'm like, wow. And because the design and long hair thing, and it made it very confused. And also, Mononoke was designed in a way masculine. He has a tattoo on his face and always dressed like this wild, in between human and animal, in between female and male. And that idea that challenged this binary system of both gender as well as natural versus human is that make this whole story did in certain way. So I also like its spirit of way a lot, but I still think Princess Mononoke has a lot about challenge that binary system in our society. So I like that very much.
I have to pick just one. Are you serious? Well, the one that jumps to the top of my head is really tiny. In advance of this panel, I was rewatching some movies, and I was watching Spirited Away, and there's this moment where Chihiro has to run outside for something, and she comes down and gets her shoes. And the woman sits right to give her shoes back, and she puts on her shoe, and and she pauses and just taps her foot, you know, to set the shoe. The way that, you know, when you're putting your shoes on, you tap your feet to make sure they're in the right place, and then she leaves. And I watched that, and I realized the attention to detail, because in order to create that moment in film, they had to take animators and draw an extra 100 pictures. You know, I don't know how many extra pictures it takes. And I kept seeing things like that over and over and over again in these films, where he took the moment to tap the shoe and make that person at that moment much more real. And it's totally, but there.
It's hard to pick, but Kiki is actually one of my favorites. And as a creative person, somebody who creates words, and I also draw a little bit, that one has always spoken to me. When Kiki loses her ability to fly, and she struggles with that. She goes to that cabin with Ursula, and you know, is trying to kind of find her voice inside of her again after being criticized by these girls. Those moments just really speak to me when I feel like I lose my creative voice. And there was a time, I'm like trying not to get teary, but like it did affect me a lot. There was a time when I was really struggling. Before I got published, I was just trying to get published really a lot, and it just wasn't happening. And I got really depressed, and I felt like that really spoke to me when I watched Kiki in those moments, because I was the one who had like lost my ability to fly. Like I just couldn't write, I couldn't do anything, I just felt horrible about myself, and I didn't ever know if it would come back. And like, you know, when she gets that motivation at the end to save him and starts flying again on a rusty old, you know, mop/bush broom thing, and she just makes it work. That moment just means a lot to me as a creative person, because it told me that like, maybe I don't feel like it'll ever come back right now, but when I'm least expecting it and when I need it most, it might come back. And that's always really meant a lot to me as a writer.
I have a great Kiki story too.
Well, the devil, as they say, is in the details. And Miyazaki is all about the details. And not just tapping the shoe stuff, but go to also a Spirited Away, when they take the train, and they get off the train, they're met along the road by a hopping lamp. And it is a scene that didn't need to be there at all. You didn't need any of that. But it's eminently charming. And that's the thing that Miyazaki has, is the ability to charm. Like I said, I watched Kiki in a room full of 20-year-olds who were in there, robots shooting each other, and with a guy who spoke Japanese but not as well as he needed to explain the movie, and we still loved it. But for me, I think that the scene that still gives me chills is from Laputa. And it is Castle in the Sky, for those of you who don't know the original, all of you should. It's the scene where Laputa finally is destroyed, and things are falling apart, and the sound of the explosions and the damage pods down, and this wonderful score comes up. And I know that the composer, when they did Laputa, they were short on budget, so it was all done with synthesizers electronically, and this was just done with voice. It was to choir singing, and it's just beautiful. And Miyazaki really assembled some top talent, even on budget, to do a lot of this stuff. And he re-recorded all of the score when Disney re-released it. It's called the Enhanced Soundtrack. And if you have a chance to get that, it's really incredible. And I wanted to kind of move away from a lot of everybody's talking about the character moments, but I think that there's some other artistry there. I always get chills when that score comes up and you see the destruction, but you can't hear it anymore because the sound of the destruction is going down. And it's sad, and it's poignant, and it's wonderful. And that's really why I go to Miyazaki's films.
Can I add something here? Because Miyazaki is a wonderful director, but also Studio Ghibli has a lot of wonderful directors as well, so I want to promote someone else. So Miyazaki has been a producer for other films as well, and we talked about the details of animation. Studio Ghibli is wonderful of making details of animation in many ways. So, for example, Grave of Fireflies, it's not Miyazaki's film, but it's a Studio Ghibli's film, has a lot of such details that you mentioned. It's really a film that can be done in live action. So while Miyazaki is retiring now, you should still look, into other directors' movies. They are also wonderful.
What's the film? I've watched this like 3 times. My mind's trying to blank. What's the film with the Tanukis? You guys are the one that's
Pompoko.
Pompoko. Yeah, if you haven't seen Pompoko, that is charming. It's a story about these, they're like raccoon-like creatures, and it follows the story of them losing their home in the environment as Tokyo builds, and they have these magical abilities to affect the world around them, but no matter how they try, they can't stop the advancement of humans. It's a really beautiful story if you haven't seen it.
That is such a theme in Miyazaki's films too.
Yeah.
Just thinking about, there's always a moment in every single one. In Mononoke with, the clash of society versus nature, and then even in like Spirited Away when she's pulling out that thing from the spirit, out comes all this trash that was supposed to be in the river, and you see it in Ponyo too, with all the trash that is on the ocean floor. He tends to put those details in about how we kind of are ruining nature. It's very subtle, but he does it over and over again. Yes, sometimes not so subtle, but like, he doesn't outright say this is what's happening. He just shows it.
Yeah, well, it's a detail that's included, but it's not the main focus.
Yeah.
Sandra, you had a question or a point that you wanted to get to?
Oh, I just had another inspirational Kiki story, but now moving on.
Well, you guys probably should go into questions. We're about halfway through, a little over halfway through, so
Yeah,
throw it out to
Why
you
is
guys.
there nobody cosplay with any characters in Miyazaki?
I saw Son.
Where is it?
stand up,
Stand up! We
stand
want
up.
to see!
Anybody else?
He's not here, but there's a Buffy talking about walking around somewhere.
I've seen a Kiki.
Good call.
I've seen a Kiki.
Yeah, I saw it.
I've seen a Kiki.
Oh, who's that out there?
There's actually a question. I saw a question back there. Speak loudly.
So one of the things about Miyazaki's films that I find interesting, like you've mentioned the details, with those details he also will change wording slightly whenever they translate it. Watch the subtitles, what they say, listen to what they say. They don't match.
They always like that.
It's fun because he matches the mouths so it doesn't have the old Gamora, and then the mouth's still going or stops while it's still going. He finds those details. Historical significance, cultural significance, the spirits in Spirited Away, their cultural significance. Like you mentioned with the different showing about Earth versus people.
Yeah.
All of that. It has, all of them have that. It's even that in Spirited Away 2 or 3 times. There's different references to
Right.
it.
No, that's a very good point. Thanks for bringing that up. Can I say something about that? As long as I feel like I hate to say this, if I own the movie, I don't mind watching pirated versions of it also. And I know I'm kind of terrible, but the thing is, I hate to say it, but the fans who do the pirated versions do a better translation. For some reason, the fan spirit of like, I don't have to get paid for this, I just want to capture the story. They capture it, and one of the big moments that just really captures this is in Porco Rosso when Porco's on the phone, he's just barely been shot down by the American, and everybody thinks he's dead. And he comes back and he calls Gina, and she's saying, like, Porco, I don't want you to turn into like a roast pig. And he says in the commercial translation, he says, a pig's got to fly, which, it doesn't click with me. I was like, oh, okay. But if you watch the pirated version, it's a pig that doesn't fly is just an ordinary pig. Isn't that more powerful? It's a huge difference. So, yeah, buy it first, and then...
Any questions?
One thing to keep in mind, if I answer quickly, sometimes translations are off just so there's little things, like you said.
And also the culture, American
American culture, we're ADD. That's just how it is. But they kind of change it slightly so it kind of works with an audience better. Like there's phrases that we know, like pigs don't fly or when pigs fly. It's a very popular saying, so they kind of fit it in there so it kind of spoke to American audiences. But That's kind of what happens in translation. So it is a little different, but it's kind of done on purpose. So.
I think the difference between subs and dubs are most likely intentional to fit into a particular culture, and I think that's we have to see it positively. On the other hand, it introduces this story to broader audiences, and also if you can see both version or multiple version, you start understanding your own culture more in certain ways. You reflect that. So I kind of see that as a positive thing, that we can understand more about the difference between cultures.
Absolutely.
Okay, back to Star Wars.
I just want to say, for myself and my children, Miyazaki's movies have been kind of defining cultural influence in our lives. My kids refer to all these movies, for many years, by the names of the heroines. The Shida movie, the Sen movie, the Chihiro movie. They don't do the whole name, but it just has been such a big part of our lives. And if Miyazaki-sama listens to the dialogue of this, I just want to say thank you, because it has been such an influence. And offer a very humble correction, maybe, that Miyazaki's movies do have giant robots. They're the best. You've got the giant warriors. You guys with the tapeworm arms. They're awesome.
Exactly.
But I think, we understand what you're saying,
Yeah. And I think when the reference to giant robots that was made, I forget who was panelists was talking about giant robots.
That would be me.
Basically, it's that it doesn't focus on them. It's not the main focus.
it's not about blowing stuff up. Yeah, we understand, like, we totally agree with you.
I agree. There is John Rojas here. I'm just a big fan of Gundam.
There's a question here.
Yeah.
What do you think is the most underrated film?
Most underrated film.
Castle of Cagliostro, no question. Who here has not seen Castle of Cagliostro? Oh gosh, you guys, it's his first one. Oh my gosh. Steven Spielberg saw this, and maybe he was having a good day, and it was a little bit of exaggeration, but he said it's the best animated film, or the best action, he said it was the best action animated film of all time. So that's not a... It's about, by the way, it's about a thief who steals from thieves. And he just has an uncanny ability to see things. He's kind of like, not in character-wise, but he's like Jack Sparrow, where everybody is like 10 steps behind him, and the whole thing's just a ride. It's as good as Indiana Jones. It's his first film.
Warning, it's more
We haven't brought up Nausicaa, The Valley of Wind. I think that one's pretty underrated.
Yeah, and it's an excellent film, and it's one of those, it's kind of ignored because it is part of a larger group, because Lupin the Third is his own character, he has his own series.
Yeah.
But Castle of Cagliostro is one of the best films involving that character. I kind of like the Spectre myself, but that's just a preference. I like Wimbledon cops. My favorite, and I don't think it's underrated, but I don't think it's seen very often, is Nausicaa Valley of the Wind. Because I know people who have seen like Totoro and Arrietty and Spirit Away, but they haven't seen Nausicaa. And I think that's kind of a loss because
It was created before Ghibli.
Yeah, before Ghibli, but it's an excellent.
It's really good.
So I think if you guys haven't seen it, please do. So.
In the dress, right there.
Just on that note, I think even more underrated than the Nausicaa anime is the Nausicaa manga, which
Absolutely.
I agree. Yeah.
is the greatest work of art.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I encourage everyone to read it.
Yeah.
I was actually going to add on to that because I read the manga before I saw the animated feature, and I felt pretty let down by the animated feature.
Yeah.
Even though I understand why, it's because it was made long before the manga was even finished. But honestly, the animated feature is okay, but you feel like something. You're like, there was a bit of cognitive dissonance of what the heck just happened. But if you read the manga, it fills in all those gaps, and it's like, oh, it's a more complete story. It's actually very, very beautiful. So you're debating, if you want to get the full story, don't watch the movie, read the manga.
Okay, good advice. Let's right here.
Almost is the reversal of the Christ figure, where it's a heroine that saves everybody instead of the fabled man. That's something that I love about Miyazaki. He's always created his own mythos for each reign of his thing. So I want to ask you guys, what is your favorite twist on his mythos? What do you think are prominent symbols or whatever?
let's start going down the line here. But before, I just want to mention that was one thing about Princess Mononoke, that if you go back and watch it now, it seems hackneyed, that the women, like the women of Irontown, are very sassy, and they're like, the men don't bother us unless we want them to. But Miyazaki was, 10, 15 years ahead of that movement. But yeah, let's just go down.
I forgot the question now.
The twist. The gentleman asked about the twist that you enjoyed.
Kind of like the kind of types. I kind of like where he instead of having, I kind of like how some of his characters, Son in particular, where the heroine is a child, where you're seeing it from a child's point of view instead of an adult's point of view, because we're all used to like major characters like Kate Girl and John Wayne and the adults that are kind of they're already established some sort of badass, but we have these children who are put in a situation where they have no idea what's going on, but they find the strength to overcome, and it's kind of overcoming adversity but not having to blow stuff up to do it. It's personal. So I think that's kind of what I see it.
I hate to say this, guys, but I've watched this film so many times that he sets the standard. Everybody else does twists off of Miyazaki for me. So, yeah, I'm just going to skip this.
Okay. Yes. I want to say, for me, Miyazaki is not twisted enough of a lot of things, but one thing that I do think I want to mention, and one movie we haven't talked about is Howl's Moving Castle. Miyazaki film, you actually see not really. We see a lot of other strong old women figure everywhere in his film, but this one, he kind of abandoned this idea of using this young, cute heroine to lead the story. Most of the time, she was this old lady figure. So that is actually, for me, a strong message that Miyazaki was aware of the strong criticism of his film. That's always this shoujo heroine in his film. That is actually the biggest of his film's criticism. And then I see that's happening in Howl's Moving Castle, and I think that's a strong message she wants to do.
I don't know that I have any particular twists in mind. When I see over, and I'm sitting here trying to think of an answer to this question, he doesn't create anybody flat. He doesn't use a trope or a character type. He creates a person, and then he tells a story about that person. That's what works for me.
And I'll pass in the interest of fitting in one or two more questions from you guys, so I'm sure you guys know how to ask questions, right? Over here.
Well, with Spirit Away, it was really Rising Wind, the last movie. I mean, it was really a beautiful film, but I felt a little disappointed. There was none of the fantasies you got in like Totoro or those sort of things there. You felt a little disappointed at how he did it.
With Totoro?
Wind Rises.
Wind Rises.
He didn't touch on
yeah.
his fantasy that he was famous for, and Totoro, Ponyo, these really great films.
The environmental thing you're talking about?
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because the environmental thing is very ubiquitous throughout his work, but at the same time, his flying thing is very ubiquitous as well. But both of them are not in every single film. If you look at Princess Mononoke, that's like one of the few that does not have flying. All the rest are not flying, and so then there's The Wind Rises, and then there's not the environmental factor. Do you feel like that's a strength or weakness in his work?
Well, I just very much just like the flying
Or the magic, Rock on Poppy Hill doesn't really have much magic. Well, no magic anymore.
Oh, I see.
I want to say, as an interpretation here, I think that's a perfect ending for Miyazaki as a kind of announcement of his retirement. It's an ending of his time. He was born, during World War II, and his father was an aircraft designer in Japan at the time. So for me, it sounds like a beautiful kind of ending for him in that way, about how his time has been passed in that sense.
No creator is going to make a creation that speaks to every single person. Each creation speaks to an aspect of that creator, but if what you love is this aspect of the creator, and then create something over here, it's not going to speak to you the same way. But that doesn't mean that it is less as a creation. It just means that it doesn't hit your sweet spot. You know, and not only that, but I mean, half of what we get out of a film is what you bring with you to the theater. You know, I have spent.
Next, the lady here in the pink hair has been trying for a while.
If anybody hasn't gone, go to the Ghibli Museum in Mitaka in Japan. I've been 3 different times. It's wonderful. They show Hayao Miyazaki's shorts, like The Return of Totoro. That's, for any Ghibli moment, that's my favorite one. When May's walking through the forest, she sees all these different sizes of cat bus, and then Totoro finally makes his appearance, and your heart just leaps when she screams, Totoro!
Thank you for sharing. That's great. Back there in the blue.
Commonly on the internet, a lot of people usually consider Howl's Moving Castle one of the weakest movies of the studio. Personally, for me, it's one of my favorites. I wanted to ask, how do you feel about that kind of criticism towards that movie? Do you feel like it's justly a weaker version of other movies, or do you think it's a more misunderstood movie?
I love Howl's Moving Castle.
Yeah,
it's one of my favorites.
It's an excellent film. I like it.
But a lot of times on the internet, I always run into people that say it's weak.
Yeah, like, when it comes to criticism, I mean, as a person who creates things and gets them criticized all the time, what Sandra was saying before applies where, you know, like, not everything's going to hit every person in the same way. But also I found a lot of times, like, things that become the most popular are also criticized the most. I mean, like, I know a lot of people who, like, Howl's Moving Castle is their favorite one. And, like, from an American perspective, Howl's Moving Castle runs on a more Western-type plot because of its inspiration in the book, which is actually a Western book written by Diana Wynne Jones. Yeah, so I think that one, more than some of the other ones, actually appeals to a Western audience more, but critics of Miyazaki will probably find it less Miyazaki-like because of that, and so it probably got criticized.
The thing that I liked, the criticism I liked the most about that was when they asked Diana Wynne Jones about it, because it's nothing like the book. Okay. I mean, it's got the same names, but that's it. And she made some comment, I can't remember the exact quote, but something to the effect of, well, it's not the story I told, but it's a wonderful Howl story. Yeah. That's the criticism I put with it.
I think we have time for like one last question, so with the black shirt and the red tie.
I've noticed a lot of Miyazaki movies make statements like, Princess Mononoke is environmentalist, Howl's Moving Castle is anti-war, and a lot of these statements are pretty obvious when you watch the movie, but unlike a lot of other movies that we would provide as preachy, we don't in Miyazaki, so you enjoy the plot and the characters at the same time that he implements the plot. How do you think that he managed to do that, to have those overt statements?
It's magical.
Characters first.
Should we end there?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys so much for coming.
You guys need to pitch anything before? You got any more panels, signings?
This is Miyazaki.
Thank you all for coming.
See you guys.